This is Deborah Johnson for Women at Halftime, and I'm passionate about helping women use their untapped skills, resources, and talents to create their ideal work and lifestyle, making a difference in their second half. Well, hello, Deborah Johnson here today for the Women at Halftime podcast. So happy to be back with you another week. And I'm real excited about today's episode, especially because as this show is released, the book, The Summit, is released. If you're watching the video, you'll see me holding up the book. I'm so excited about it. It's available in all forms, hardbound, paperback, ebook, and audiobook. And I'm so excited about you being able to at least preview it. You can look at it at heromountainsummit.com anytime, and also on Amazon. It's available there. Today's show, it's kind of a fun one to produce. And as I was writing this book, which is an allegory, which is a story within a story, we have a protagonist, we have an antagonist, and so I'll explain what those are as I go along. But I read through the entire series of Harry Potter and also some other type of allegories and stories just to be inspired and to kind of see what the format is. And today I thought I'd do one kind of interesting with the subject, the Summit, and how it relates to Lord Voldemort. Okay, and if you know anything about the Harry Potter series, you are familiar with Lord Voldemort, as he was the arch enemy of Harry Potter. So we're going to kind of dive right into that. And I'm going to first tell you who Lord Voldemort was. He was a fictional character created by J.K. Rowling for the Harry Potter books. And he's the main antagonist or the enemy in the series. And Lord Voldemort, he cast this grim shadow and he created fear and doom and gloom. And he had these names like, you know who, he who must not be named, and Dark Lord. People were afraid to even say his name. And his mere presence brought fear and trepidation. And in the allegory, The Summit, in this book, our protagonist, Mallory, she faces her own Lord Voldemort adversary of fear, of cowering, and of distraction. And even her name, Mallory, meant ill-fated. And it reminded her that she was not good enough. And in fact, I have written a little bit about her name. Her mother named her that name, Mallory. And Mallory means ill-fated. And she was hearing this sort of chant, Mallory, Mallory, you're ill-fated. Even your name is understated. I mean, how many times have we heard these little nursery rhymes on the playground and kind of reverted back to feeling not good enough? And that's exactly what Mallory was feeling. And she is our protagonist, which ends up being the hero or the victor throughout the story. But she has her own set of obstacles to get through and her own sort of Lord Voldemort obstacles to get through. And even her name, it reminded her that she wasn't good enough. And many people live their lives in fear of a Lord Voldemort. They put names on their fear like war, a plague, or even a virus. And that fear has the power to overtake their lives as they focus on impending doom and gloom. You might be in that same spot. So who was Lord Voldemort really? Who was this character? Lord Voldemort's original name was Tom Riddle, born December 31st, 1926. He was an English half-blood wizard, considered to have been the most powerful and most dangerous dark wizard of all time. And his superior was Albus Dumbledore, who ended up providing guidance for Harry Potter as the headmaster of Hogwarts School for Wizards. Now, these are fictional characters, but they really have that story. And with any fantasy, including a realistic fantasy, there needs to be that antagonist or the enemy to face the protagonist or the hero. And I think it's fascinating that J.K. Rowling, as the author, she created this whole lineage and the history with multiple characters in the Harry Potter series. It was fascinating all the way through. And because she did that, she created a framework for a number of sequels with characters that were intertwined and with all of their backstories to eventually meet its climax with the complete destruction of Lord Voldemort. That's where we're headed through that whole series, hoping this will happen, that the victor will win. Now we've got these adversarial characters in the Summit in this book that I wrote. And the Summit's characters who play adversarial roles, they are not nearly as dark as Lord Voldemort. It's a different type of a story. But they also spread fear and they cast a grim shadow. Mallory's prideful brother, his name was Tristan, and his aim was to discourage her from continuing her journey by setting out to save the day and bring her back to her small town of Babel, where she could continue to live in obscurity and cowardliness. However, his self-assurance based on his pride, it often backfired with creating confusion, adding to his own personal failures. It's one of the characters, and it was her own brother, and many times it's one of our own family members. Now, Beishman, another character, his name meant strong man and formidable, but he was another character whose aim was to dissuade Mallory, our main character, from continuing her journey. And he bullied her as she was building a bridge, and he also tried to steal the jewels that she had obtained on her trip. And those jewels were to be ultimately spent to invest in a future full of possibility. He was trying to get a hold of those. Now, his own failure in reaching his summit, it propelled him to use his personal strength to intimidate her, though her inner strength won out as she had at this point in the story, she had grown stronger because she had gone through many obstacles of her own. And this is a very important part right now of the story, because she had to go through the multiple lands, all of these areas of the land. Do I have this right side up? Oh, wrong side. When you're looking at the video, you will see this. But she had to go through all of these multiple lands and go through those obstacles to be able to gain her own personal strength. And that's what happens in our lives as well, and how important that is, that sometimes we just have to go through those valleys, and we have to go through those times of discouragement and despair even, and feeling not good enough and feeling intimidated, so we can grow stronger in finding out really who we are. And as I go through this episode, I will explain how Mallory became even stronger through her journey. But she had to go through that. No one else could go through that for her. And she gained then the strength so she could face even that character of Beishman. Let's talk about fragments of fear in your life. Now, this was kind of weird. Lord Voldemort, he split his spirit into 8 fragments, creating 7 Horcruxes. It's spelled Horcruxes. Hard to say. But of course, it's all fiction and fantasy. But there are fragments of fear in our lives, and we can treat them as Horcruxes, part of our spirit, or part of our being. There's fear of taking a risk, fear of failure, fear of rejection, and ultimately, there's fear of death. And that's what keeps people locked in their houses, locked in their rooms, and afraid to even go out. Whether fighting a fictional Lord Voldemort or the real life feelings of fear, we all have the power to choose what and how to think and respond. Those fragments of fear occurring in the book, The Summit, they took shape as self-doubt, self-condemnation, and feelings of giving up. Now, this was our main character that went through this, all of those feelings of that self-doubt, self-condemnation, feelings of giving up. When Mallory was out on a bridge and she has to, in part of the story, I won't give it all away for you, but she's building a bridge, finding out what her strengths really are. And she feels, she trips and falls and she just feels like just totally giving up. When she's climbing the mountain, she feels like totally giving up, like what's the use? And many people have come to that place in life too. They're almost hiding in that fear. And that is the connection here with the Lord Voldemort, how we have that Lord Voldemort character here of that the enemy and the evil one, and the evil type of fear. There's a good fear too. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but that fear that just holds us back and it makes us be the self-doubt and self-condemnation. It's very self-focused. And the word self is in it. It's inward, and it's what a victim mentality does. It's inward. It's not thinking outward and what we can give and how we can be a part of a change. Very important in our world today. And to be able to take a stand and to say, we have what it takes to influence our world. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't want to quit at this point in my life. I don't want to just say, okay, I'm in my second half now and I can kind of rest easy. I can just go and travel full time. I can do whatever I want. But that's not what I want to do. I want to be able to work remotely. It's very hard to work remotely. I will be doing a webinar on that coming up again. It was a very popular webinar last year. But how to do that does take some work and planning ahead. But it's very important to get beyond this focus on just that self. And it's hard because there's so much fear. And I think recently, especially, there's been a lot of fear of just, and it ultimately gets to the fear of dying, especially as we've had this recent fear of dying from a pandemic. And so all of these measures people are taking is, it just is trying to keep away from that death. So those fears will never fully go away, but they can be managed and they can be used constructively. And I'm going to go into that here, is how to defeat your Lord Voldemort to get to your summit. Okay. All right. I know you're all sitting at the edge of your seats here because you're wondering, how do I get to my summit? But fear is a definite part of your life. Now, it will never totally disappear, but you can use that energy that fear produces in a healthy way to create a healthy fear to propel you forward. That was a hard one, to propel you forward. So how does that happen to propel you forward with that fear? Well, it does create energy. So you just need to be able to channel that somehow. I'm going to give you a couple ideas on that. Because fear, there's a healthy fear as well. I mean, that healthy fear keeps you from jumping off of a cliff. That healthy fear keeps you from overdosing on your medications. That healthy fear keeps you from drinking too much. All of that's the healthy type of fear. But an unhealthy fear keeps you locked in your little cubicle and afraid to go on. It's that unhealthy fear even that keeps you from even taking a risk of doing something that you've always wanted to do. There are so many people like that. They're letting life go by. And on those last moments of life, what are you going to remember? No, I really did go for it. And that was exciting. So that could be part of your Lord Voldemort that you are fighting. I'm fighting a sneeze right now. Okay, so the first step of handling that fear is to recognize it and to recognize it for what it is. The fear's aim is to make you take your eyes off of your main purpose. It's to distract you and discourage you. It's to hinder you from getting to your summit. And part of that hindrance in the book is something called the social media circus. You'll have to read it to find all that out. But by giving into this fear, your chances of failure have just increased by just giving into that distraction and that self-focus. Now, Harry Potter, he knew who his enemy was. And with the shadow and that legend of Lord Voldemort, and as that persevered through that ridicule, the hardship, and extreme isolation that he came to, he was definitely fearful. But he kept his focus on the goal of defeating the enemy, even when few believed in him. He had a couple friends around him, but he had to go it alone many of the times. And when you face those feelings of ridicule and hardship, do you recognize their source? Are you able to keep your eyes focused on your main purpose? Or are you easily distracted and discouraged? I can be. I'll readily admit it, especially as I write. Now, this is a kind of an interesting side note here, because as a writer and as a speaker and as one that puts a message out often, many times I have to live what I write. So for example, as I am producing this, I have recently written some articles on hope. And in the book, there is this little band of hope. I'm wearing it right now. If you're watching the video, it's kind of fun. It's a little yellow band, and it's what Mallory wears in the book, in the summit. But I have battled my own hopelessness lately. I've looked at things and with some of the messaging around me, and I have had that sort of heaviness. And I realized why is because I really need to live and be authentic with the message that I'm bringing. And it's not that I'm always filled with hope. No, I was discouraged. I go through those definite times where I feel like, what's the use? Who's even reading my articles? I've been writing articles for 20 years. Is anyone even reading them, or is anybody listening? What's happening? Is this really making a difference for anyone? And am I too old? Oh my goodness! If you read Women at Halftime, my book, I open it up by looking in the mirror. The beginning introduction of that. And as we look in our mirror and all of a sudden realize, oh, I think I look like my mom. I think I'm growing older. Oh, I'm seeing all of those smile lines. We used to call them smile lines. Now, of course, we have all sorts of things to help us to try to preserve a little bit more. But really, I go through some of those same feelings of being distracted and discouraged. And it's very important for me to go through the steps that I'm outlining even right here in this show, in this episode, of how to get beyond being distracted and discouraged. And as our character Mallory, she grew stronger through her journey in the summit. She did so not only by overcoming mentally and her mindset, but she journaled her thoughts to remember where she had been and to keep her eyes on where she was going, her main purpose. Boy, journaling. And I talk about that all the way through the book. I have to do the same thing. She created the type of language that could combat that negativity and the self-doubt that she was facing. And that takes persistence, dedication, and the willingness to not give up. And the message, I'm going to sneeze again here. This is a live broadcast. So I don't just take all of this out. I think I'm beyond it. The message with the emerald, one of the jewels, Mallory discovered was to never, never, never quit. And if she took on the mindset to grow and learn as she defined her skills, her experience, and what she loved, then she would find success. And with that mindset, I know that you will find success as well. Now, let me go through that again, because that is very, very important. If she took on the mindset to grow and learn as she defined her skills, she defined what experience she had, and figured out what she really loved, then she would find success. I have a program called, or a little branded area of finding all of these things, the skills, experience, and and what you love. It's called the core common denominator. I put that in my Women at Halftime book as well. But it's a really good, especially during the second half of life, because you want to really focus on what you love to do. It's not just on your skills. You want to focus on those things that maybe you've put off for a long time, but you want to find the nuggets of areas where you can expand upon. And that was that mindset that Mallory in the book, The Summit, took on, to where she could grow and she could learn. She decided to do a little something every single day and grow in her skills, even on her journey to the summit, which this is a realistic fantasy. That is the book, The Summit. It's a realistic fantasy. It's a story, again, a story within a story here that we've got. But it's a short and sweet story that has so much impact if you apply it to your life. And I wanted to write something that you could almost live right along with our character and to be able to grow and learn yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed today's show, today's episode. Our main subject was the summit and how it relates to Lord Voldemort. And as I am facing my own little allergy attack, if you see this video and you see the little graphic, you will see that QR code as well. You can go right to the book on Amazon. So I always appreciate you being able to do that. So much fun being with you. Make sure that you connect with me on all of my social media sites. I'm Deborah.Johnson. That's I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all of them, actually. But you can find me on the womenathalftime.com and goalsforyourlife.com. Next week, make sure you join me. The subject is emotional support in relationships. And I put this one in. It's with Greg and I. My husband of over 40 years now. I do admit that because it's quite a landmark for us, really for anybody these days. And we are on once a month together. I bring him on with me. It just adds a little variety. But there's so much that we have to say for friendships, for relationships, no matter what relationships you are going through, just as we work together. And so I'll be talking about that emotional support for each other. And I felt like it was an important one to talk about because I really needed a little bit of his emotional support through when I am writing these projects. And you can get some of that support from a good friend as well, or a good colleague. But to surround yourself with that is just really, really important. So thank you again for joining me today. This has been an absolute pleasure. I love being able to produce these podcasts and appreciate always you sharing. You can write a review. If you share it, that's the way people know about these podcasts. It's one of the best ways. And I listen a lot as well. And so I love it if you listened and shared it, especially some of the episodes that you enjoy, and subscribe so you don't miss a single one. Thanks again for joining me, Deborah Johnson, womenathalftime.com, and I'll look forward to being with you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on Women at Halftime. Visit goalsforyourlife.com or womenathalftime.com for many more resources, downloads, and programs, or to get in touch with me. I'd love it if you leave me a review and tell your friends. So until next time, this is Deborah Johnson, signing off.